Hello, everyone. With the recent news of South Africa's land seizures from an identified group of people, I thought I'd create this flowchart to explain the more fundamental issue that's at stake here, and that is land ownership rights. So, putting aside the issue of racial groups or identified groups in general being targeted by government policy, this is instead going to look at why individual rights to property ownership are so important and very much taken for granted. So at the start of this flowchart, we ask the simple question, who owns the land? Now, more often than not, we see that the state does technically own the land, and the individual is more renting it through property tax, and in a legal sense, does not have ultimate claim over the land. The second question you want to ask yourself as it relates to state ownership is, does the individual consent to being removed from the land? And it's a simple yes or no answer. However, regardless of whether the answer is yes or no, the ultimate legal ownership of the land belongs to the state and not the individual. Because of this, there is no legal precedent for the individual to have the option of saying yes or no. Ultimately, the government can come in and say, we are taking your land, we have ownership, tough luck. So, in a legal sense, the government is justified in this action. Whether or not it's morally justified is a completely separate issue. Looking at the case where the individual owns the land, however, um, there's a very different set of options. The important thing to note here that distinguishes the individual from state ownership is that the individual ultimately has legal authority to say, yes, I will renounce my claims on this land and give it to the state, or they will say, no, I own this land, and you have no legal precedent or authority to remove me from here. Ultimately, if the individual decides yes, typically there is some financial compensation or other means where the individual is enticed to say yes, in which case both parties, this being the individual and the state, are very happy with the outcome, and the government is justified in its action. They have consent from the individual to obtain the land. If the individual says no, then the government really has no legal authority to remove the individual from the land. The individual has expressed that they want to keep what they legally own, which in this case is the land. So the government has no legal precedent to say, we're overruling your opinion and we're taking the land anyways. This is what's ultimately at the core of the issue in South Africa, whether or not it's targeting uh, an identified group of people, which in this case would be the white farmers in South Africa, is kind of irrelevant when state rights are not considered. The fundamental underlying issue is, does the individual have any ownership of the land, regardless of their race, creed, identified group, anything like that? It doesn't matter if the state has control of the land. The state can ultimately come in and remove people from the land that they are only renting and not owning. This should be the fundamental issue that's being looked at more so than the group of individuals being targeted for this land grab. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.